Brad Caston. Thank you for joining me in this live video. I have to give you a little warning first. I'm using StreamYard for this, and I'm going live on a couple different platforms at once, and it's the first time I've done it. So have a little patience with me if something goes awry. I hope it doesn't. I don't think it will, but something has already gone awry. I forgot to put my mic on. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me just fine. And oh my goodness. Well, I'm off to a little shaky start, but my mic's on. I think hopefully you can hear me. And what we're going to talk about today is all the stuff you need to start paint pouring. I get this question asked to me all the time. What do I need to start? People love to see the paint pouring. They want to give it a try, but they don't know what to get, what kind of supplies they need. There are so many different things you can get, and it can get really, really confusing. So I'm going to hopefully simplify things way down, show you just the essentials you need. It's not that much stuff, and you could get started with paint pouring right away, really quickly, maybe even this weekend if you want to. All it really takes is one trip to Walmart. If you have a Walmart close by, that's fantastic. You can really get everything you need at Walmart. It's really that simple. If you don't have a Walmart by you, any other craft type store works great and will have pretty much everything you need. If you have a Michael's nearby or another, even like a Joann Fabrics, has a lot of the stuff we need for paint pouring. And if you don't have any of that, or if you're even out of the country or across the world somewhere, I will show you a variety of different things. And all you need to do is find the closest replacement for that. And none of these things are very complicated. They're pretty straightforward, pretty easy to find in most places. When we get into the pouring mediums and paint, that's a little different, and I'll give you a couple different variations of things you could use. But just use the closest available product that you think would work. And just jump in and give it a try. Paint pouring is so much fun. There's no need to overthink it. There is a ton of information online. Like you go to Facebook or YouTube, and you're going to be overwhelmed with a million different things. But hopefully this video will just kind of break it all down for you in an easy to understand way, and you can go gather your essential supplies, and off and running you'll be. So, and I'll also share a few optional things that you might want to pick up if they look interesting to you. So let's get started, and let me talk about the very first thing you need, which is paint. Obviously, for acrylic paint pouring, we need to use some acrylic paint. And the very cheapest, most affordable, easy to find for most people is craft paint. And there are a lot of different brands. I'm going to share a few that I really like and have worked really well for me. So first, before I get into that, I'm going to switch my camera and give you a better view of these paints. So just a second. I'm going to switch over here. Okay, so here's my top view camera. And the paints that I recommend are craft paints that come in these little bottles. These are just 2-ounce bottles of craft paint, or 59 milliliters. This brand happens to be Apple Barrel. This is the Walmart brand of craft paint. And this is about the cheapest craft paint you'll be able to find. It's about 50 cents, I think, a bottle. That's pretty affordable, in my opinion. And they do have different kind of variations of paint. This is the matte acrylic paint. They have a semi-gloss and they have a gloss. Those get a little more expensive, but still not that much. The matte will work just fine for you, though. So Apple Barrel paint works fantastic. You can find it at Walmart. Here's another color. And one great thing about all of these craft paints, they come in such a wide range of colors. You can really find any color you're looking for. So you can mix and match and really come up with some really awesome paint palettes. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in colors. Now, another brand of paint that I like to use is called Craft Smart. I find this at Michael's. I think this is the Michael's brand paint. I'm not positive about that, but they have a lot of Craft Smart products. This is very similar to Apple Barrel. This is also a matte, or this is a satin acrylic one. This is a matte, I think. But again, they come in different sheens, like satin, matte, gloss. Don't worry too much about that. Just find the colors that you like. They all pretty much work the same. They're interchangeable. So if price is an issue, go for just the matte, the cheaper ones. But you could experiment with some satin and some gloss as well. But Craft Smart is a great paint. They have a lot of different colors. They have a lot of different sheens. They have some metallics, which work great. Another brand that I like a lot is DecoArt. And these are DecoArt Americana paints. Now, these are getting a little more expensive than our Craft Smart and our Apple Barrel. These are probably about $1.50 maybe a bottle. It's a little bit better paint. It's a little better quality. I really like the DecoArt Americana. It works awesome. They have a great range of colors. Here's a DecoArt. This is a gloss enamel. So again, they have matte, they have enamel, semi-gloss, all of these different variations. But they all work great. DecoArt also has metallics, which I really love using. They have these dazzling metallics. I use metallics in most of my paintings. I love them. So metallics are great to play around with. Metallics get a little more expensive too, but they're really fun to play with. And then also Folk Art is another brand that I use. And with Folk Art, I mostly use their metallics more than their matte paints or other colors. I really like their metallics a lot. And the Folk Art paints you can also find at Walmart. So you could get the Folk Art metallics along with the Apple Barrel paints. So that's another advantage of going to Walmart if you have one nearby. But all of these paints work really great. I'll show you one other brand, and this is a DecoArt. This is more of a premium craft paint. This is called Extreme Sheen. This is a sapphire color. These are fantastic. They're a metallic paint, but these are more expensive. What does this one cost? This is $3 for this bottle. But they're really fun to work with. The Extreme Sheen have really brilliant colors, and they can actually help create cells in your paintings, which is a nice side benefit from using them. But if you're just starting out, I would say stay away from the Extreme Sheen or any of these other kind of fancy craft paints. You'll see color shifting paints, and you'll see chameleon looking paints and all sorts of different paints. I'd say stay very simple. Stick with the basics when you're getting started. That's all you really have to worry about. Just get some inexpensive matte Apple Barrel or Craft Smart or DecoArt paints, and you'll be good to go. So that's the craft paint, and these are probably the easiest way to start. And that's probably what I'd recommend starting with. But there's another type of paint that I use a lot, and I'll show you that one right now. So let me just clean these up, and I'll just move these aside. All right. So the second type of paint I would recommend are these tube paints. Now, these tube paints come in a variety of brands as well. These are all a little bit higher quality. These are, well, I'd say a lot higher quality than the craft paints. Some of them are quite a bit higher quality than the craft paints. I'll talk about that as we get into that a little bit. But these are what I use most often, actually, are these, they're known as student grade paints. And this is an Artist Loft brand. I use this brand a lot. You can find this at Michaels. Artist Loft is the Michaels brand. And these paints are fantastic. This metallic blue happens to be one of my very favorite colors of all the different paints. I just love this color. This is a turquoise. These come in 4-ounce tubes, and these are going to be a little more expensive than the craft paints. This is about $4, I'd say, between $4 and $5. One nice thing is Michaels usually has sales all the time on their brand of paints, which is nice. So if you look for those sales, you can pick them up and get a little more bang for your buck. Artist Loft are great. This is Master's Touch. This is also a really good paint. I like this a lot. This is also a student grade paint. Master's Touch is the brand name for Hobby Lobby. So if you have a Hobby Lobby nearby, you can find this brand of paints there. They always have sales on Master's Touch brand paints all the time. I think once a week maybe, where you can buy one, get one for free, or buy one, get one 50% off, or something like that. They have a great range of colors. These again are probably about $4 for a tube, and they're in like a 4-ounce tube of paint. One thing about these types of paints are these are more light fast than our craft paints, than like the apple barrel paints. These have a different standard of the pigments that are inside, so the sun will not be as harsh and damaging on them. They will hold their color truer longer than like the apple barrel paints. I don't think these have any kind of rating for light fastness. I think they're pretty much a temporary crafty type of paint. They're not really meant for fine art, but they work great for just starting out and practicing our acrylic pouring. So that's one of the big differences between these type of tube paints and our craft paint. Now, if we go up to the next level, we get into this type of paint. This is also a student grade. This is from Blick, Blick.com. They are a huge online retailer. I've gotten lots of things from Blick, and they also have a lot of stores around, so you can maybe find a Blick store in your area. This is their student grade acrylic paint, and these are great. I've used these many times. Here's actually the light fastness rating right here. It says light fastness of 2, which is pretty good. So this is a good paint to use. This is very similar kind of to the Artist Loft and the Master's Touch. I'd say maybe a slightly elevated, but pretty much the same. And then we get into these two types of paints. This is a Liquitex Basics brand of paint. And then this is Amsterdam acrylic paint. And these are both, I'd say, a higher end student grade paint. They're kind of the high end student paint into almost a professional brand of paint. Especially, I'd say the Amsterdam is kind of right on the line between student grade and professional. Liquitex Basics uses all the exact same pigments they would in their professional line of paints. The only difference is there's slightly less pigment in these basics, but that's also makes this paint a much more affordable type of paint to get. I love the Liquitex Basics. I think it's probably my favorite type of paint to use. They have an amazing range of awesome colors, and I use many of them. And Amsterdam, too, has a great range of colors. I love the Amsterdam paint. They're very similar, and they work fantastic. So I'd say these two are more premium than these two. They're a little more expensive by maybe $1 or so. These are a little easier to find because they're at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Liquitex, you can find at Michael's. Amsterdam, you probably have to order this online. Blick is a great place to order Amsterdam paints. You could try out their Blick line. You could try out their Amsterdam line. And they have a ton of other acrylics. But these are what I recommend if you're have started a little bit and you've practiced some and you want to move up into maybe away from the craft paint and into a more professional line of paint. I'd say start here. As far as the more professional brand of paint, let me switch my camera view quickly, just a second. So I'm back. I wanted to be on camera for this. I would not recommend using any of the professional grade paints if you're just starting. I think they are, they're very expensive, first of all, and they're not necessary. You can do amazing things with these simple paints that I just showed you. With the Blick, the Liquitex, the Amsterdam, you can make incredible paintings, and they have a very high light fastness rating with their pigments. There's no need to go to like professional paints like Golden. That's the Ferrari of paints. That is the best you can get, in my opinion. But the price is also like the Ferrari of paints. They're really expensive, and rightly so. They're a premium professional grade paint. But there's no need to use that right off the bat. Wait until you've honed your skills. Wait until you've mastered some techniques, and wait till you're ready. You'll know when you're ready to jump into that next phase of supplies. But when you're beginning, there's no need to go there right now. I think that your money is much better spent in buying a lot more of these cheaper paints and then practicing more. Just get a lot more paintings done than spending all this money in these premium supplies and then having poor results. The other thing about spending a lot of money on art supplies, and this is good no matter if you have a lot of money or have very little money, this is going to apply to you. The more money you spend on your supplies, the more self-conscious you get about your artwork. If you're painting with a $50 tube of paint, and some of the golden paints get that expensive and more, you're going to be pretty self-conscious. You're going to be pretty uptight about using that paint. You're going to be nervous about it, and it's going to come through in your painting, and your results are just not going to show in that you spent all this money in this on paint when you have poor results. So be freer with your paint. You can paint much easier and freer. You can let your inhibitions go when you're working with cheaper supplies. That is a very important lesson, I think, for all artists, because a lot of what comes out of our minds and comes out of the cup when we flip it, we have to be free and not uptight about, oh my gosh, do I need this much paint, or worrying about these other stuff. We just have to really let go and paint freely. And when you do that, your results are going to improve exponentially. So that's just a little side, lesson there. But I found that it's something a lot of people struggle with is using enough paint, or they're worried about too much paint, or they don't want to use as many colors. So just think about that when you're buying these supplies and getting started in paint pouring. I think it's far better to spend less money getting cheaper paints, doing more paintings, using more paint, and getting the feel for it. You're not going to really worry too much about the money, and you're not going to be wasting all these really expensive supplies. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just dumped $50 worth of paint on this. Terrible. Don't worry about that. Spend $5 worth of paint, and even that's quite a bit. You'd have to be painting kind of fairly large for that. So I'll get off of my little soapbox here, and we'll get back into the supplies. But I think it's an important lesson, and I like to talk about it with my students in my classes. So, okay, let me move these paints aside, and let's talk about the next thing we need to address, which is our pouring mediums. And all these paints are great, and they work wonderfully, but they're too thick for acrylic pouring. We have to mix the paint with something, to thin it down and make it more fluid and more thinner viscosity. So there are two pouring mediums I'm going to recommend, and they're both pretty inexpensive. They're both pretty easy to find if you're in the US. Neither of them are an actual pouring medium, I'll say, as in they are not like acrylic art products. There are a lot of professional grade pouring mediums out there that have acrylic binders and things like that in them. These two products do not have that. I call them pouring mediums because I use them to thin our paints. So anything we use to thin our paints, I just call a pouring medium. It's kind of a catch-all phrase I use. They're not technically pouring mediums, but that's how we're using them. The first one is Elmer's school glue. And here it is right here. This is just the school glue you find at Walmart. Again, all these things can be found at Walmart, except for a couple. School glue is fantastic to use. You could also use Elmer's Glue All. That's a very popular pouring medium that a lot of people use. I actually prefer the school glue. It's cheaper. And I think the results are just as good as the Glue All. I've got some Glue All right here. This is a big, like about half gallon worth. But this works great. It's just more expensive than the school glue. But both will work great. So both work wonderfully for you. This is going to be our pouring medium. And I normally use this with the craft paints. And I have used it with, the tube paints as well. But normally I use it with the craft paints. School glue is not an archival product, really. This is not like an artist grade material. So use this for practicing. And you can do some really pretty awesome paintings with it. The painting I have right here, that one is all Elmer's glue. It's school glue and craft paints. That's all it is. And I made that one. And I love that painting. So you can do some pretty awesome paintings with these two materials. And normally as far as a ratio goes, I'll mix 1 part glue with 1 part paint with the craft paint. And then I'll add maybe a touch of water if I need to. But that's kind of off topic. That's my mixing formula for glue. The second type of pouring medium is the one I use most often. It's probably my favorite, and that is Floetrol. And Floetrol is not a pouring medium technically. It's not an art product. You find this at the hardware store or the paint store. I get this at Home Depot. It is a paint conditioner. And what that means is you add this to your wall paint and it will even out brush strokes and roller marks when you're painting your walls. It's a great product. I mean, I've used it actually for painting walls. It works great, but it works exceptionally well with acrylic pouring. It thins our paint and it really helps generate cells. I don't know exactly why. It has to do with something with the ingredients in here, but it really helps generate cells. And most of my paintings with Floetrol, that's all I use. I'll have Floetrol and paint, a little bit of water, that's it. And I get a fantastic cells. Floetrol is great. It's pretty inexpensive. There's only one thing you have to know about the Floetrol. And I'll share that with you right now. You have to strain this stuff. So if you buy this, this is a quart. You can also get it in gallons. Just a second. Whoa. Here is a gallon of Floetrol. I usually buy the gallons. They're a little bit more affordable than buying the quarts, but you have to strain it. Now the Floetrol can develop some gunkiness and stringiness in there. So what I do is I get a, let me show you what it is. I get paint strainers. So this is a pack of paint strainers. You find this in the paint section where you'd find the Floetrol. This is actually right next to the Floetrol in my Home Depot, but this is just a fine mesh is what this is. It's like a bag. So it's like a fine mesh bag, and I'll just cut it up into small little squares about, 3 inches by 3 inches. And I'll use a rubber band, and I'll put the little square on top of the nozzle here, twist up my rubber band, drop the rubber band on, and just trim around the excess. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And it'll strain your Floetrol as you're pouring it out. You'd also, pour your Floetrol into another bottle if you want. I generally just pour it out of these quarts. The strainer actually kind of slows the flow of Floetrol, so you can control it pretty easily. But that's pretty important, is to strain your Floetrol always. So one of these is what we're going to use with our paints. You can either get the Floetrol, you could get the Elmer's School Glue. If you're just starting out and you're just testing to see if you like this or not, go with the Elmer's School Glue. It's much more affordable. You could probably go with the Floetrol too. It's pretty affordable, but pick one. Don't get them both. Just pick one of them and give it a try. So that's our pouring mediums. Those are both very essential ingredients that we need. So we have our paint, we have our pouring medium. The next thing we need is some kind of cup or something to mix our paint in. And the greatest cups that I found are called souffle cups, or they're called snack cups. Let me switch the camera again. Let me take a look here quickly. Oh, hi, Sandra. How are you? Arlene, thank you for joining me. Hey, Casey. How's it going? I'm just checking my screen here to see if there are any comments. And I said craft paint, Casey. Haha. So thanks, guys. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll get to them. I'll take some periodic peeks over at the screen and answer your questions if any of them come up. So let me switch the camera again really quick here. Okay, so we need some we need some cups to mix our paint in. These work amazingly well. These, again, I found at Walmart. These are 5.5 ounce cups. And the great thing about them is they come with lids. So you can keep any leftover paint and just put the lid on, and it will keep for quite a long time. So these are also known as souffle cups. And I buy them in kind of larger quantities at restaurant supply stores. Like Smart and Final is one that's near me. So I buy kind of these big sleeves of souffle cups. But these are great. And the other thing about these is they're also reusable. So if you just let the paint dry in these, any leftover paint, let it dry and they will just peel right out of the cups and you can reuse them again. So that's another great thing about these plastic souffle cups. So I use these most often when I am mixing my paint. So souffle cups are wonderful, but any kind of a plastic cup or paper cup work great. These are what I normally use for mixing. When I'm actually layering a cup to pour, I will use a couple different things. I use these a lot. These are just cheap paper cups. I get these at the grocery store. You can actually find these at the grocery store now. So they're widely available. But these are a 3 ounce cup. And 3 ounces just happens to be the perfect amount for an 8x10 canvas, which is great. So paper cups work really good for layering your paint in. This is another one here. This is your bath cups. These are a plastic one. I've gotten these. These are from Walmart also. So these work great for layering your paints, especially like an 8x10 is perfect because you need about 3 ounces of paint for an 8x10. So these are fantastic. So, but you don't have to use like a plastic cup or a paper cup. Any kind of cup will really work. You could use, there are silicone bowls you can buy that are reusable. I have some silicone cups that I've used, and those are great. You can just peel the dried paint right out of them, reuse them again and again. Again, I reuse these a lot. I have a bucket of water that I keep right under my table. So when I'm done with these, I will either put them on a shelf, let them dry, then peel the paint out or peel the paint out of them, or I will just dump them in my water bucket and then the paint kind of dissolves off of them. So these are fantastic. So you're going to need some cups to mix your paint up in. The next thing we need is something to mix our paint with. And the easiest thing for that is just some jumbo craft sticks. These are just wooden, cheap craft sticks. You can find these. Any craft store has them. Walmart has them. Michael's has them. They're the easiest thing to find and use at the beginning. If you really get into paint pouring, I recommend you invest in some plastic stir sticks. I've got a couple different types. I've got these, which I really like. These are from Unicone Art. They're plastic and they have a little kind of handle. They work awesome. I reuse them all the time. Again, once I'm done mixing with them, I'll just throw them in my water bucket. Or I have these also. These are another type of plastic stick that I use a lot. They're very thin, but these are used for applying wax to like your eyebrows or something and then ripping them off. So it's like a wax stick or something, but they work great for stir sticks, and you can reuse them over and over again. So you're not constantly, throwing craft sticks away. So now we've got how to mix our paint. We've got our cups, we've got our stir sticks. What else do we need? Well, we have to pour our paint onto something. Before I get into that, let me take a look here. Arlene asked, here, let me do this. I can do this and it's really cool. So, hi Arlene. Arlene asked, what is your ratio using Floetrol? My ratio with Floetrol is 5 parts Floetrol to 3 parts paint. but another easier ratio would be 2 parts Floetrol to 1 part paint. They're very, very close. I'm just used to mixing it with the 5 parts to 3 parts. But if you just go 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part paint, that's great. That will work great for you. So that's a great question. And let me hide that. All right. Learn my StreamYard here. This is very fun. So let's go to the next thing. We need a surface, right, to pour our paint onto. And I have a couple recommendations. My number one choice would be stretched canvas in getting the bargain value pack canvases. I'll show you a couple here. Oops, something fell. Okay, sorry. All right, so can you all hear me still? Hopefully. All right. Okay, so these are value pack canvases. This is a brand new size, actually. I got this at Michael's. This is an 8 by 8 inch canvas, and these just came out, or at least I've just seen them recently. So you can get 12 canvases here, and for about $10. That's pretty good. That's less than $1 a canvas, and they're stretched, so they have stretcher bars in the back here. And these work fantastic. I've gone through so many canvases, and these bargain value packs are probably the best all-around surface that you could pour on. I love them. So this is a great size. 8 by 8 is a really good one. I probably wouldn't recommend going too much smaller than 8 by 8 because then you're just kind of running out of area for your paints to do their amazing things. So I'd say 8 by 8 for me would probably be the smallest size I'd want to work on. These also come in an 8 by 10, which I use in all my classes. So 8 by 10s are fantastic to use. With those packs, you get 10 canvases for about $10. So it's about $1, a little over $1 for a canvas. I think that's a pretty good deal. And you can also reuse these if you don't like the painting. You could always paint over it. So you can use these a few times. I wouldn't recommend going over these more than probably 2 or 3 times with different paintings. But you can use them again a couple different times. So let me put this down. And I'll show you this really quick. I had a 10 by 10 pack right here. So this is the 10 or an 8 by 10 canvas 10 pack for about $10, $11. I think is the going rate right now, but these are fantastic to work on. Now, the next thing you could use, I don't have any with me. I haven't poured on them in a long time, are small white tiles from Home Depot. I think they come in like a 4 by 4 or a 6 by 6. Those work great also, and they're very affordable. I think they're 20 cents a tile or something like that. They're very cheap. So you could pick up a whole bunch of those and do a bunch of little tiny pours on them. Again, 6 by 6 for me, that's pretty small. I like to have a bigger surface to paint on. But, you know, if you want to give them a try, a lot of people paint on them and use them for coasters, or they paint different techniques. I know they're very popular with the bloom technique, which is a really advanced pouring technique, but they use coasters or use tiles a lot, and they turn them into coasters. So that's another surface. The third surface, which you can use, but I'll give you a warning about it, are canvas panels. And come over here, canvas panels. So here's a pack of 8 by 10 canvas panels. I've poured on many canvas panels. They work just fine. The only problem with them is your painting will warp inevitably, because all that liquid and all that water from the acrylic paints makes these things just bow up kind of like a potato chip. So you will have to try to flatten these things out after they dry. It can be kind of a pain. Sometimes the backing will buckle and tear. So there is a risk in using these canvas panels. If you're just practicing and you can't get a canvas, or you don't want to buy stretch canvases, go ahead and try them, but just be aware that they'll probably buckle and warp on you. So, but they are pretty affordable and they're pretty easy to find. So that is another surface. Now I'm going to give you an alternative that I've experimented with, and it's a secret hack that I've developed for a super affordable pouring surface. And this is really only for practicing, but it's incredibly affordable. It works really well. It takes a little bit of work, but you don't have to buy all these canvases or canvas panels or tiles. And I'm not going to share exactly how to do it, but I'll tell you what it is. So if you take freezer paper, and I use freezer paper all the time. I put this down on my table with the shiny side up and pour onto the freezer paper. And then once the paint dries, it just peels right off the freezer paper. But if you take some freezer paper and you take a canvas that's, wrapped in its plastic still, or even a cradled panel if you have that, or even a I just lost the word. Even if you have a canvas panel, they will all work. What you do is you cut your freezer paper oversized, you tape it tightly around your canvas or your canvas panel or your cradled like wood panel, and you pour right on that. And it pours great. And you make sure the shiny side is facing outwards because you're going to be pouring on the shiny side. It doesn't absorb the paint. You can do all the tilting and everything just like you normally would with a stretch canvas. Put it aside for it to dry. When it's dry, you just take the paper off, and I'll show you what happens. You end up with something like this. This is just a piece of paper. This is the freezer paper that I wrapped around a canvas, did my pour, it dried, and then I just took the paper right off. So now you could practice like hundreds and hundreds of paintings using just one canvas and just some freezer paper. And this probably, I don't know, I didn't do the numbers, but this probably is less than 10 cents of paper to do this. So you could do a huge amount of practicing just using freezer paper, one canvas, and some masking tape. You need some masking tape too. But it's a great alternative if you don't want to spend a bunch of money on all these other surfaces. And I'll do another probably live video, and I'll show you exactly how I make these and wrap them around my canvas. I don't want to do that in this video, but I just want to let you know this is a super cheap alternative to canvases or canvas panels, and it works great. So let me put this aside. And let's take a look. What else do we have here? The other thing we're going to need is something to protect your tabletop or your working surface. Acrylic pouring gets really messy, so it can get everywhere. It's going to get all over your hands and probably going to get on your clothes. So you probably want to wear some like an apron or old clothes. Nothing you are going to want to keep because you're going to get paint on it eventually. So there's a couple things that you could use for protecting your furniture and things. I recommend just getting some like really inexpensive plastic drop cloths for painting. These work great. They're, again, Walmart, you can find them. These work good. Another thing is these plastic tablecloths. These are like party tablecloths. You can find these at like the dollar store. I found this one at Walmart for $1. So these are great. They're affordable. You can put them down. You can probably reuse them if you wanted to once or twice. These tear pretty easily, but they work great for just protecting your furniture. You also might want to think about protecting your floor too, especially if you're working on carpet. I would definitely get like a drop cloth and lay that down underneath your table. And another thing to watch out for is if you spill paint on the floor, don't step in it and track it through your house. That can be very nerve-wracking and will make you upset. So we definitely want to protect our furniture, our work area. And these are some pretty inexpensive ways to do so. And again, I love to use the freezer paper, and I will put freezer paper on top of my plastic drop cloth or on top of my plastic tablecloth. And it works great. And I will either just let the paint dry on there, or I will scoop up the paint and put it in another cup, and I can reuse the paint later. So freezer paper is fantastic for that. And I love the freezer paper. Again, you can get this at Walmart, the grocery store has this. So it's very easy to find. Okay, what's next? Let's talk about some push pins. If you're going to be pouring on stretched canvas, you probably want to pick up like a little box of push pins. And I put these in the bottom of my canvas just to elevate them up off the surface. I also use something called cup hooks. I'll show you one here. And I'll get a big one. These are called cup hooks. This is a great big 1.5 inch one. But these are, let me switch the camera so I can show you better. So this is a great big old cup hook, and I'll screw this. They have threads on one end. So I'll screw this into the bottom of my canvases on all 4 corners. And then the canvas will be elevated up off the surface, and I can easily grab underneath it for tilting and stuff like that. And any drips that come on the bottom of the canvas, I won't be setting a canvas right down on my work surface. But the easiest way is just get some push pins and put these in the bottom of your canvas. Those work great. They're cheap, and you can find them anywhere. And that's great for elevating your canvas. I'll show you an old canvas I have. Here is like a test painting I did. And this is just an 8x10 cheap canvas. And so I didn't put tape or anything on the back, but here are the push pins. You can see them right here, sticking out from the bottom. So this is elevated off the surface, and that helps me grab it, and lift the canvas, and then I can tilt and do those types of things. And so that's what we use push pins for. So, okay, let me switch my camera back, and I'll check the questions just a second. Okay, here's one. This question asks, what if you don't want cells? What pouring medium would you use? That's a great question, Doreen. And there are a couple mediums that will not promote cells. Actually, Elmer's glue is a pretty good medium if you're looking for an inexpensive medium, like the school glue, the glue wall. It doesn't help promote a lot of cells, so that would be a good one to use. Another one, though, that I would use that doesn't inherently generate cells would be the Artist Loft pouring medium. That's a nice pouring medium. It's not super expensive. I've got it on my shelf right over there. But you mix it with your paints pretty much the same way. I'd say maybe 2 to 1, maybe 2 parts pouring medium, 1 part paint. It's a glossy pouring medium, so your painting is going to end up really glossy, which is kind of a nice look. It's a very pretty glossy finish to the pouring medium, but it does not inherently generate cells. But it does create some amazing sharp lines. So if you're looking for like ribbon pours, things like that, it'll create amazing looking ribbon pours, really sharp lines, leave a glossy finish. And that's probably the one I'd start with, is the Artist Loft pouring medium. Another one you could try, I haven't tried it all by itself, but it's kind of popular, there's a pretty affordable pouring medium called Sargent's pouring medium. You can find that on Amazon, I think. I have some. It's pretty affordable. I haven't done it. I haven't experimented with just that and paint doing pours. I've always incorporated it with something else. But that might work also for not generating cells. So hopefully that answers your question. That's a good question. Because cells, they're awesome, but not everyone loves cells, or sometimes you're not going for cells. So yeah, great question. Okay. So let's see. Let me put this aside. And okay, next up, so that's pretty much it, actually. I think we've covered like the absolute essentials you need for acrylic pouring. We've got we've talked about our paint. We talked about our pouring medium. We talked about some mixing cups, some mixing sticks. We talked about some pouring surfaces, canvases, and things like that. We talked about protecting your work area. The only other thing you would need is some water. And I like to use like a little squeeze bottle. You could find a squeeze bottle at, your dollar store, grocery store. Just put some water in it. It could be tap water. I generally use distilled water. I don't know why, but distilled water has nothing in it, no minerals or anything like that. So, it's a little bit more pristine and doesn't have any stuff in it. But you could use tap water also. But we're going to use a little bit of water, and that's only to kind of fine tune our paints to get them to the proper consistency. So a little bit of water. Water is something you'll need, and that's pretty much it as far as the absolute essentials. Now I'm going to talk about a few optional items you might want to get if they look interesting to you or you think you might need them. The first one is gloves. And I've got some gloves back here. I always wear gloves when I'm pouring. I like these nitrile gloves. I have a brand that I use, and I always provide these for my students when we're doing classes. But I think it's important to wear gloves. I know a lot of painters do not wear gloves. They can't be bothered, or it doesn't bother them at all. I think they're pretty important because acrylics paints are going to get all over our hands. I mean, they're going to get everywhere. And acrylics are not that easy to wash out. Plus, we're working with things like glue and Floetrol. And sometimes we're working with other additives like silicone. And that'll just torch your hands. It'll dry them out, and it's hard to wash all the stuff off of them. So I just wear gloves. It's just, for me, that's the easiest way. But you don't have to. There are so many people that don't wear them. The only other thing I would mention, though, is if you're working with pigments, like some more professional paints that have organic pigments in them, like cadmiums and cobalts, well, those are heavy metals, and we don't want them in our bloodstream or on our skin. So, people tell you all the time about oil paints. Don't get oil paints on your skin, or heavy metals, cadmiums, or cobalts, because they can absorb, in your bloodstream. Well, they use the same pigments in acrylic paints. So just because they're water-based doesn't mean they're non-toxic. So you don't want to eat them, and most of the time you don't want them on your skin. So that's my little rant about gloves. So you can wear them if you want or not. I recommend them. So gloves are good. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier, but we'll take a look at it right now. If you're looking for your paints, I use one other type of paint in two different colors. This is Artist Loft Flow Acrylic White, and this is Artist Loft Flow Acrylic Black. Now, you don't have to use these. They come in these quart containers. You can very easily get white craft paints. I use that many, many times. I use black craft paint, black and white tube paint all the time. But I use these a lot, and a lot of other painters do as well. They're a little thinner consistency than our tube paints, but they work great, and they come at a pretty affordable price. And in paint pouring, I've found that we generally use a whole lot of white and we use a whole lot of black. At least I do. So this is a nice alternative if you're looking to do a lot of white paintings or a lot of black paintings. I love the Artist Loft Flow Acrylic. Now, this does not mean that it's ready to just pour right out of the container. You do still have to mix it with the Elmer's glue or the Floetrol. The Flow Acrylic, it's a little misleading. It sounds like, oh wow, it's ready to pour, but this has been around a lot longer than the ready to pour paints that we see now. So don't be confused by the label, the Flow Acrylic. You still have to mix it with the pouring medium to make it fluid enough. But these are great paints to use if you get in the paint pouring and you need a lot of white. These are great ones to get. So I guess it is kind of an optional product. Okay. So let's see here. What else do we need? Or what else was I going to talk about? We're talking about optional items. Now, another optional one would be silicone. A lot of people talk about silicone. A lot of people think silicone is the only way to get cells, which it's not. It can help with cells, and it can definitely create a lot of cells, and I use it for a very specific technique. I do not use it all the time. And I hardly ever use it when I'm using the Floetrol. I hardly ever use silicone with the Floetrol. I pretty much only use it when I'm using the glue medium. And I use two different types of silicone. Let me switch the camera quick here, and I'll show you what they are. So the first type is pretty easy to find. It's this coconut milk anti-breakage serum. You can get this at the grocery store. You can get this at Walmart. And there's a lot of different products that are called coconut milk. But, and this, so you need to get the right one. This one is by OGX. And it's probably about $15 maybe. But it works great for getting cells. It also smells great. But what you want to do if you're going to get this stuff, take a look at the ingredients on the back. And of course I got, it comes right off. Good. Look at that. I got black paint on the back. But the first ingredient, you want to check whatever product you're going to get. The first ingredient is called dimethicone. So dimethicone is the silicone. That's what creates the cells. So you want to make sure the coconut milk hair serum you're looking at has dimethicone as the first ingredient. If it has that, then you're good to go. And then these will work great. So I use the coconut milk a lot. I think it works wonderful, almost as good as the other silicone I use. And the other one I use is this stuff. It's called Spot On. And this is called Precision Pouring Oil. It actually was originally sold as treadmill belt lubricant. It's the same exact stuff. I ran out of my first bottle of this stuff, and I got this second bottle because it comes with a nice little needle tip. I don't have that on there right now, but they renamed their product Precision Pouring Oil. It's the exact same stuff as the treadmill belt lubricant. And it's 100% silicone. It works great. You only need a couple little drops in your paints, and you don't even have to put it in all your paints. Just a few paints works fine. So this stuff you can get on Amazon. I buy this stuff on Amazon. I can't remember. The prices are always changing, but it's not that expensive. And one of these bottles will last you forever. The only reason I ran out of it is because I use it all the time in my pouring classes. So I go through a lot of silicone. But anyway, one of these bottles should last you like your lifetime, I would think, unless you do a ton of painting. But so this is the second type of silicone I use. Let me switch my camera. And again, I don't use it all the time. The technique I really like to use it with are flip cups or floating flip cups with the glue recipe. And then I'll put some silicone in there and, tilt the canvas and then use a torch, and it brings out the cells. The cells just kind of bloom forth, and it's beautiful. It's just a gorgeous type of painting. It's a very specific look to it, but I love it. And you've probably seen tons of paintings like that. Julie Cutts is a master of doing that technique. So if you want to see what it looks like, check out Julie Cutts. She does it as well as anyone else I've seen. But so that's a beautiful technique that I use the silicone in. And I also use it in swipes, like a basic swipe. I'll use silicone too. But aside from that, I don't use it all that often. So, but as long as we're talking about torches, that's another optional item you might want to get. So here's my torch. And I just got this one. I've had it for a while now, but I had another torch I used before this. I like this one much, much better, like 1,000 times better than my old torch. The old torch was also about twice as much money as this torch. This is just a a pretty cheap torch I got on Amazon. I'll put the link. I'll talk about links in a minute, but this torch is great because it's so simple. It has a trigger to start it. So I'll start it right here. So there's the flame, if you can see that. I don't know. You see the flame? So you just pull the trigger and it works great. The other one I had a push button. So you have to push kind of like in the back here with your thumb. And that got kind of hard sometimes, especially if you don't have strong thumbs. But the trigger works great. And it has just a little dial here to control the intensity of the flame. So you can get a shorter one or a longer one. And that's it. It has two little controls. Well, it has a third one, but I never use it. It's a lock. So you can lock the flame on, which I don't recommend. I never lock the flame on. So it's gotten tons of paint on it, but it's about, when I bought this, it was about $10. I'm not sure what the price is now. Again, the prices always change on Amazon, but I will get a link and share that with you. But this is a great torch. I love this thing. So I'm thinking about getting a couple more just to have them on hand. But it works wonderfully for me. So this is a torch. You don't need it. In fact, I only really use this to pop air bubbles in my base coats and things, or when I am doing the silicone in the glue mix. Then you need kind of a torch to heat up the silicone, which blooms it forth. So that's our torch that I like. And let me see here. Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Let's see. Hi, Zena. Hello from Europe. How do you calculate how many grams or ounces of color I need for the canvases? That's a fantastic question. And I have just the thing for you. I have a canvas coverage cheat sheet. In fact, hold on one second. Let me grab it. Okay, so here is the canvas coverage cheat sheet. Let me switch the camera and I'll show you a closer look. So this one is actually, I have two versions. I have one that is in ounces, and then I also have a milliliters over here. But I also have another one that is in metric. So it has centimeter sized canvases. And then it also has the milliliters of paint. I don't work in grams, but I work in ounces and I work in milliliters. So hopefully you can convert like the milliliters to grams if you wanted to. But what this sheet does though, I have all of the most popular canvas sizes on the left here. And then I have a calculation that I've worked out over trial and error to come up with all these different measurements. So like for an 8x10, which is kind of the smallest size on here, I need 3 ounces. And that's if I'm doing a flip cup pour. And then over here, I have a ring pour, also a ring or straight pour. I like to use a little less paint with those techniques, so I'm able to stretch out the rings more. So I have 2 measurements. So it kind of depends on kind of what you're doing. You could also use 3 ounces for your ring pours if you really like the super tight rings. I just like to stretch them out a little bit more. I like to use a little less paint, so I created 2 different measurements. So for an 8x10 ring pour, I'd use 2.5 ounces or 74 milliliters of paint. For an 8x10 flip cup or floating flip cup or any kind of thing like that, or a ribbon pour. I mean, these can kind of translate to a lot of different techniques. I would use about 3 ounces. So if you go up to a bigger size canvas, 18x24, I do a lot of painting on that size canvas. 16.5 ounces is what you need for a flip cup. And also, and for a ring pour, 13.5 would be what I would use. And in milliliters, 488 millimeters for milliliters for an 18x24. And if you get up into a great big gigantic painting, like a 24x30, that's a pretty big size canvas. 28 ounces of paint. So that's a lot of paint. And let me switch the camera back really quick. So yeah, but this is a very important question though, because if you don't have enough paint on your canvas, the tendency is to overstretch the paint to try to cover the canvas. And that's really going to distort your design, and it's going to distort all of your cells, and it can really kind of wreck your painting. Now, opposite that, if you use too much paint, well, the first thing is you're wasting a bunch of paint that you don't need. But the tendency with too much paint is you're going to try to keep all the cool stuff on your canvas. So you're not going to dump off as much paint as you should, because there really needs to be, there's a amount of paint that needs to be on your canvas. You don't want too much paint to be on your canvas. You have to, get some of it off of there. If there's too much paint, there's a really high chance that your painting will crack when it dries, because the paint is drying from the top down. So that bottom surface of paint, there's so much paint on there, it's going to just crack the top apart. It's also going to craze, which means it's going to like wrinkle up the paint as it's drying. So this is not like a perfect chart, but it gets you in the ballpark. That's kind of the design of it. That's why I created it. It gets you really close. So you can go over that amount. You can go under that amount a little bit. It doesn't have to be exactly these amounts, but it's just to get you close in the ballpark. And let me see if I can do something. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that one. Let me go over here quickly. If you go over here, acrylicpouringacademy.com, I have a little link at the top called Free Guides, and you can download my canvas coverage cheat sheets for free there. So you can get the ounces version, or you could get the metric version, whichever one you want. So there are two to choose from. So that's an important resource, and I use this all the time myself. I can never remember all this stuff, so I'm always looking at how much paint I need for different size canvases. So it's a great resource. I always use it. And I also have another thing on here on the side, which is a circular canvas. I don't really pour on circular canvases that much, or circular rounds, but I have a variety of sizes there with their corresponding ounces or milliliters if you're pouring on round format canvases. So great question. Thanks for asking that one. Again, you could go to acrylicpouringacademy.com. It's right down there, and pick those up for free. Okay, let's go back. Oops. Let me hide that. And any other questions? Let's see, no other questions at the moment. Let me move this over here. And let's see, anything else I was going to talk about? Let's see here. Oh yeah, let me talk about a couple other optional supplies you might want to pick up. One of them happens to be just a level. This is just a very cheap bullet level. And I use this for just checking my canvases to make sure they're level before I pour on them. And then also checking my tabletop or my surface where I'm going to move my painting, if I'm going to move my painting somewhere to dry, to make sure that surface is level also. Because our paint takes usually around 24 hours to dry thoroughly. So it's about 8 hours where it's really liquidy and really wet. And so if it's on a slanted or tilty surface, your design is going to start to change and shift, and you could come back to a big puddle on the side of your canvas in an extreme situation. So it's always a good thing to have a nice little level available just to check your canvases, check your surfaces to make sure they are level. I also have a great big one back here. This is a great big level that I use for my larger canvases, like a 18 by 24 or something like that. I'll check those. The longer the level, the more accurate it is. So if you're doing a lot of big paintings, I recommend getting a bigger level, a big one. And these are very inexpensive. I like this one because it's super cheap, and it's also really lightweight. So it's not going to be like really heavy on my canvas or anything like that. So levels are a great thing to pick up. Let me move this one. Another thing you might want to pick up is a really cheap measuring spoon set. I use something like this all the time. I have a lot of measuring cups. I'll show you a couple of them. This is the set I use most often. It's a little like OXO brand, but I love this little set. It has ounces and it has milliliters on it. I work in kind of both ounces and milliliters, but these are fantastic for measuring your ingredients to get accurate mixes. Something like this you could pick up at the dollar store and you could pick up one of these. You could pick up a measuring cup set if you wanted to. I highly recommend getting measuring tools so you can accurately measure your ingredients. And I have a bunch of tricks for that that I can share with you another time. Here's another one. This is a Anchor Hawking thing. This is like a glass one. I got this at Walmart, I think, but it's got ounces. It's got milliliters. It's just a very versatile little measuring thing. So I've got a lot of measuring tools. I think they're pretty important to have. And I think it's really important to be very consistent in your mixing everything the same way every time. The biggest reason for that, not only can you gauge the quality of your results, if the results are bad, well, now you know what you mixed in your paints, you can adjust that. If your paintings are great, well, you know what you mixed in your paints, and you can keep doing that. So it's very important, in my opinion. Another thing that I think is, and a lot of people talk about, I don't mix anything. I eyeball it. I do it by eye. That's fine. If that's the way you're doing it and getting good results, that's great. If you're eyeballing it and getting bad results, well, I'd suggest maybe trying to measure your ingredients. But the other thing, I lost my train of thought. Well, I think I kind of mentioned it. You can adjust based on your results. So if something's not working, you can go and take a look and see what you did. You can adjust it and then measure those new results. If they're working better, well, then you're on the right track. And just like if you're doing great painting and you want to reproduce those results, well, you have a formula. You got a recipe for repeating that. It's not going to be exactly the same, obviously, but you can repeat that mixture and give yourself the very best chance of getting another great result. So, in my opinion, acrylic pouring is a lot like baking instead of cooking. Cooking, you're throwing stuff in the pot and you're just a little bit of this and that, and you're eyeballing it with cooking. Well, with baking, you're being a little more precise. You're not going to, make a souffle or a cake, and just kind of, it looks like enough of this or looks like enough baking powder or whatever. You're going to be pretty precise. So I would, correlate acrylic pouring more like baking. So anyway, that's just, again, a tangent. So, but anyway, I think that's about it for the supplies that I would recommend. Oh, one other thing that I just thought of. And this is great if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of room, especially if you're doing a lot of painting and you want to move your painting somewhere so you can do another painting. Well, you got to move this wet painting somewhere. And a great thing to use for that are cake boxes. Speaking of baking, look at that. It's like I planned it. So if you go to Walmart or Michael's, you can get these cake boxes, and these like fold down flat. And these are fantastic to put your painting in after you've poured it and are done with it. You can set your painting in here, move it somewhere for it to dry. And I've got some drips in that one, I think. So I've used these many times. But then if you get, and these are not super expensive. I think they come in 2 packs. So you can get 2 boxes in 1 pack. So if you get another cake box like this one, you can stack it the opposite way, just like that. So you can kind of stack your paintings one on top of another. It gets a little trickier the higher you get, because things might want to shift. So make sure you got that level so you can check, make sure everything is nice and level. But this is a great way to kind of store your paintings while they're drying, and it's not really expensive. The box contains all the drips, so it's a really simple way, pretty affordable way to do that. So let me put those down. Okay, anything else? You're very welcome, Zena. Here's another question. Okay, Zena asks, and what about gesso? To use or not use gesso? Well, that's a good question. And I'll give you my answer. If you have a pre-gessoed canvas, let's see, just a sec. So like one of these things. So you got like one of these bargain packs. Now these are about the cheapest canvases you'll be able to find, and these are pre-gessoed. So in this case, I would not gesso. It's not necessary to add more gesso to these prepared canvases. So don't worry about that. The only time I gesso is if I'm working on like a wooden board, like a cradled panel. And I actually make my own cradled panels to pour on. I love the stability, the rigidness of panels, and I love that I don't get a canvas texture. They're super smooth, and I just love them for painting. But those I gesso. Now, before I gesso on those, there's a step you have to perform first, and you have to seal that wood with an acrylic binder type product. And because wood is very absorbent, we can't just pour paint directly on the wood. It's going to just seep right into the wood grain. It's going to cause the wood to, the grain to open up. It's going to cause a million different problems, and it's going to basically wreck your painting. So we have to seal the wooden panel. And this goes for masonite too, if you're painting on masonite, or if you're painting on MDF panels, or if you're painting on little wooden ornaments you get, or any kind of wooden anything, you have to perform these steps if you want to keep this thing for a while. This is the correct way to do it, it's called sizing the wood. So what I use for that is an acrylic, it's like an acrylic medium or an acrylic medium and varnish. Golden makes one that's great. It's called GAC 100. Everyone talks about GAC 800. Well, GAC 100 is meant for sealing wooden things and sealing your surfaces. So I'm not sure about the cost. It's kind of expensive. Another thing you can use is another golden product that they have is called just their gloss medium and varnish. And you just use that. It's a pretty liquid consistency. So you just put some in a bowl and just brush it on both sides of your wooden canvas or wooden panel or your little wooden ornament or any wooden thing you're doing. I usually put on 2 coats. It dries pretty fast. So you could probably do this in a day. Just let it dry for a few hours, then go back and do another coat. Let that dry. And then you want to gesso. And gesso, I usually use about 2 coats. And the gesso of my choice for gesso is the Liquitex, the professional Liquitex gesso. It's a great gesso. I've used a lot of them. The Liquitex one is pretty fluid. It covers really well, and you don't get a lot of brush strokes in it. You might want to thin it slightly with water. It goes on a little easier if you thin the gesso a little bit with water, especially if it's warm outside. It tends to kind of drag on the canvas when you're putting it on or on the board. That's my that's when I use gesso. Is never really to re-gesso a canvas or gesso like one of the pre-primed canvases. Those I just pour on. Another thing with the gesso, and there's a lot of confusion about this. If you are pouring over an old painting, like do you gesso that? Or you just pour over it? And my advice is do not gesso over an old painting. Like this painting here. Like if I was going to pour right on top of this painting, I would not apply gesso first. I would, if I wanted like a white surface, I would just paint it with white paint. The problem with gesso is it's really meant to be applied to like raw canvas, you know, and our acrylics are pretty smooth, and the gesso sometimes has a problem adhering to the acrylic. And so I've tried this. I've made all the mistakes you can make. So I've gessoed over old canvases and I've painted on top. And sometimes it works fine, but other times the whole painting has just lifted right off from the old painting. The gesso did not adhere to the acrylic, the first layer of acrylic, and it just rejected it and it just kind of bubbled right off. All the new water and paint that I poured on the gesso just caused it to just separate from the canvas. So I do not recommend gessoing over a painted canvas. Just go ahead and paint it if you want to get a white, like a consistent color underneath there, or that you're going to pour on. Go ahead and paint it with acrylic paint, or just pour right on top. That's what I do. I never paint, repaint one. I'll just dump it right on top because the new paint will cover the old paint anyway. So that's I hope that answers your question. Okay, yes. So let me hide that. Okay, you're welcome, Zena. Anyway, if there are no more questions, I think I'll call that a wrap for this live. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. And I will be back soon with another one. Oh, let me put this up again. And here we go. So acrylicpouringacademy.com, if you want to download the acrylic pouring cheat sheet, that's available for you on my website. There's also a acrylic pouring journal on there too that you might want to take a look at. I use that journal page for all my paintings. I find it incredibly helpful when I'm creating a new painting, and it allows me to log down all my colors. I can write down the results of my painting. I usually write down everything about every painting. So I have a physical log of what I did. That way I can go back to it, years later and take a look and see what I did. And it's a wonderful resource to have available to you. So if you want to check out that, you can go check the acrylic pouring journal and the canvas coverage cheat sheet. And also, I'm going to bring this up. If you want to join my group, I've had this group for a long time, and I haven't done anything with it really. I have 14 wonderful members in my little tiny acrylic pouring club Facebook group, and I haven't really shared much in there. I kind of let it go to pot. Sorry, but if you want to go ahead and join that group, I'm going to be posting a list of all these products in there that you could download, so you can have like a little shopping list if you want. And I'll put it in the group. So if that interests you at all, you can go ahead and check out the Acrylic Pouring Club over on Facebook. And I'll be in there a whole lot more coming up soon. I'm doing a lot of lives, and I'll be sharing all kinds of fun little tricks and tips and all kinds of things. So let me go back up here. Do we have any more comments? Thank you very much, Sandra. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Arlene. I appreciate that. And Doreen, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining me. And I will be back soon with another live, and we'll talk paint pouring again very soon. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I will see you later.